evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting webinar hosted by the Social Equity Council. Tonight, our presenter is none other than Rod Marriott from the Department of Consumer Protection. Rod is in charge of cannabis regulation and also in charge of the Social Equity Lottery. Today, Rod is going to be talking a little bit about the licenses that are available through the Cannabis Lottery. And so without further ado, I'll just to remind you that we will have a presentation, and then after the presentation is over, we will have questions and answers. So thank you everyone who is on with us tonight. You can put your questions in the chat and those questions will be read. And I think most of them with Diana, and welcome Diana, and welcome Paige. Diana is from Consumer Protection and Paige is from the Department of Economic and Community Development, who hosts the Social Equity Council. Put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to them when the presentation is over. Again, thank you and enjoy the presentation. Brad?
Thanks, Jenny Ray, appreciate it. And thanks for the introduction. Just want to let everyone know that this is ostensibly the same presentation that we did Wednesday. Outside of the question and answer period at the end. So just want to give people a heads up about that before we start, and I will begin sharing my screen now. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so adult use cannabis license information. It's an overview of the industry. A couple things that we want to start with when we start talking about this industry. Sorry about that. Just try to hide this. Okay. So all the products in this industry must be laboratory tested. They must meet strict packaging and labeling standards. Must be in child-safe packaging. Must not appeal to children. And most adult use cannabis products are subject to a potency cap, including edible cannabis products being limited to 5 milligrams of THC per serving. This term seed to sale tracking will come up throughout the program. All registrants in the medical marijuana program and the adult use cannabis program will be required to have to utilize a seed to sale tracking system. The seed to sale tracking system does not collect or store end consumer information, but it does track cannabis from the time that it's either developed, they're grown from a seed or clone to the point that it is sold into the marketplace. Local zoning. Local zoning must permit cannabis establishments in order to operate in the facility. Retailers and micro-cultivators each require a special permit or approval from the municipality. Municipalities that do not have approved zoning are currently limited to a maximum of, they do have approved zoning, are limited to a maximum of 1 retailer and 1 micro-cultivator for every 25,000 residents. This limit expires in 2024. This is a map that depicts how many of the micro-cultivators and retailers are permitted in the town. So you'll see in down below, it's not the total of retailer and micro-cultivator, it's their individual. There's 3 different taxes on the retail sale of cannabis: a state sales tax, municipal tax, and a THC tax. The adult use marketplace will open either when the licensed retailers begin operations or licensed producers and cultivators have 250,000 square feet of grow and manufacturing space, at which time dispensary facilities that convert to hybrid retailers may begin adult use sales. Now we're going to get into the actual different license types. So we've lumped our license types into different categories. There's a growing license type, which is the current medical marijuana producers. Producers can apply to expand to do adult use cannabis as well as medical. You have a cultivator and a micro-cultivator. Product manufacturing is a product manufacturer, and we'll get into the details of these later. Food and beverage manufacturing and a product packager. The sales occur in dispensary facilities, which are currently limited to only medical marijuana patients, hybrid retailers and retailers, and the transportation of cannabis can be handled by a delivery service or a transporter. This slide depicts the opening, the windows for the opening of license application periods as they stand today. The majority of these opening periods are for the purpose of the lottery process. This is just outlining the first lottery process that we're going to have, and we'll be evaluating the market for further or additional lotteries as we go forward. The one on here that isn't a lottery is the social equity cultivator, which is a distinct cultivator license with a discrete period from May 3rd or February 3rd to May 3rd. So the growing industry, there's key points for everyone to understand about the growing industry. In general, it requires a significant investment in facility, equipment, security, personnel, and other considerations necessary for grow operation. When you start thinking about things like electricity and water supply, fertilizers, things like that, it can be a very expensive proposition. And all these facilities need to meet local zoning requirements and ordinances. When you break down the market for growing, you have medical only, which is a producer. Medical and adult use markets are expanded producer, cultivator, and micro-cultivator. The existing producer license consists of 4 licensees. They may only supply to the medical market. At this time, we're not looking to expand the producer licenses, so there'll be no new producers added at this time. The existing producers are permitted to convert to expanded producer license, which will allow them to supply the medical and adult use market without entering the lottery. The current producers are the only group of registrants in the production side or grow side that are permitted or have to maintain medical cannabis growth. The expanded producer license is only eligible to these current producers. They're allowed to supply both markets, and they're required to provide a medical preservation plan to ensure against patient supply shortages. In order for these producers to expand, they have to submit an application and pay a conversion fee. The fee is $3 million, but that fee is reduced to $1.5 million if they're participating in 2 equity joint ventures. We'll explain that a little bit later. It's a business entity that is at least owned 50% or 50% owned and controlled by an individual that meet social equity definition. They have to contribute $500,000 to the Social Equity Council or have evidence of an agreement with a social equity partner, which is a slightly different situation for the way those work. For at least 5 years, a social equity partner and an expanded producer provides mentorship to the social equity partner, all overhead business costs, and 5% of its gross base to the social equity partner, which will be at least 65% owned and controlled by an individual that meets the social equity definition. The annual renewal fees for this credential are $75,000. The cultivator license is one of the new license types for this market. It allows for the supply of medical and adult use, but may choose only to do medical. May only do adult use. These facilities have to be at least 15,000 square feet of grow space. They cannot sell directly to consumers or through a delivery service. The cultivator license includes the ability to process, to create food and beverages, and to package their product. The cultivator fees are defined in two different pathways to licensure. There's a social equity applicant applying for the cultivator license located in the disproportionately impacted area. These individuals must qualify as a social equity applicant. It's a one-time application window from February 3rd to May 3rd of this year. We're actively taking applications at this time. The establishment must be located in a disproportionately impacted area. There's a $3 million fee to the Social Equity Council to obtain the provisional license. For the lottery process, which we have none scheduled at this time, to enter the lottery is $1,000, $500 for social equity applicants. The provisional license is $25,000, $12,500 for the social equity applicant, and the final license is $75,000, $37,500 for social equity applicants. The next grow type license or producing type license is for the micro-cultivator. This is also permitted to sell to the medical and adult use market, but may choose only to serve the adult use market. These facilities are between 2,000 and 10,000 square feet of grow space. They may expand to up to 25,000 square feet of grow space in increments of 5,000 square feet annually. They must convert to a cultivator if they expand more than 25,000 square feet of grow space. When they do those expansions, they are not subject to a lottery. And when they switch to a cultivator, they're not subject to a lottery. One of the unique parts about the micro-cultivator license is they are permitted to deliver their cannabis products or have their cannabis products delivered directly to consumers, except for qualifying patients or caregivers using their current employees or a delivery service. They cannot deliver once they convert to a cultivator, a full cultivator. 30 days after 5 delivery services are operational, self-delivery must cease. There's a cap on the micro-cultivator of 1 per 25,000 residents. The municipality that permits micro-cultivators. This limit, as I said earlier, expires on June 30th, 2024. And towns and cities may have specific requirements for these establishments. Micro-cultivators are permitted to perform the function of processing, food and beverage manufacturing, and packaging from their facilities. They're not required to use any of the processing license. The fees for the micro-cultivator to enter the lottery is $250, $125 for social equity applicants. The application window is currently open starting on February 10th and going through May 11th of this year. The provisional license is $500, $250 for the social equity applicant, and final license of $1,500 for social equity applicants. Processing licenses. Food and beverage manufacturer. So a food and beverage manufacturer incorporates cannabis into food and beverages intended for humans. They only obtain cannabis from other licensed cannabis establishments. They may package and label its own product. They must obtain all other food and beverage required licenses and certifications. They may not sell or deliver directly to consumers, qualifying patients, or caregivers. The fees are outlined below, with the application window starting on March 3rd, closing on June 1st. Product manufacturers. These credential holders would manufacture things like pills or vapes, tinctures, and topicals. They can perform cannabis extraction, chemical synthesis, and all manufacturing activities, including packaging and labeling of its own product. They also may not sell or transfer directly to consumers, qualifying patients, or caregivers. They may obtain cannabis from other licensed cannabis establishments. They may sell, transfer, or transport their own product to a cannabis establishment, laboratory, or research program using its own employees or a transporter. The fees are outlined there. The application window is March 10th to June 8th. There's some special points that we wanted to bring up about the manufacturing credentials. These can sometimes be very highly specialized types of registrants. They may need very expensive equipment, machines to extract the oils and plants from the plant material, and sometimes very highly trained staff. The final license in this category is a product packager. These individuals ensure the products are labeled and packaged in compliance with federal law, state law, regulations, and policies. They obtain cannabis from a producer, cultivator, micro-cultivator, food and beverage manufacturer, or product manufacturer. Their application window is from March 17th to June 15th of this year. And again, this is another credential that may require costly equipment to get off the ground. Sales of cannabis products. So as kind of discussed earlier, there's the medical market only is limited to dispensary facilities. Medical and adult use markets are hybrid retailers. The adult use only market is retailer and micro-cultivator delivery only. There are currently 18 existing dispensary facilities. All dispensary facilities require a licensed pharmacist. They may only sell to qualifying patients and caregivers, either directly or through a delivery service. And those deliveries, the self-delivery ceases after 5 delivery service licensees are operational. They may deliver directly to qualifying patients and caregivers. They are permitted to convert to a hybrid retail license, allowing for sales to the medical and the adult use markets without entering the lottery. They can convert to retail license, or they cannot convert to a retail license. And there's no, at this time, we're not looking to add any dispensary facilities. The retailer license allows for sales to the adult use market only. They may sell directly to adult use consumers or through a delivery service. Only one retailer is permitted per 25,000 residents in a municipality that permits retailers. And this limitation expires June 30th, 2024. Please check with your local municipality for the specific zoning requirements. We are actively accepting applications for this credential type. We started that on February 3rd and will be ending on May 4th. That's just the application window. The provisional license is $5,000, $2,500 for social equity applicants, and the final license is $25,000 with $12,500 for social equity applicants. So just to compare a dispensary facility versus a retailer, dispensary sells cannabis to qualifying patients and caregivers for medical use. No dispensary facilities licenses are going to be pursued at this time by the department. The existing dispensary facilities may apply to convert to a hybrid retailer. They have to have a medical preservation plan. Retailer sells cannabis only to consumers for adult use. A licensed retailer may sell cannabis and cannabis products to adults over 21 years of age. They cannot sell medical marijuana products. A hybrid retailer allows for sales for both medical and adult use markets. There are no population restrictions. They may deliver to qualifying patients and consumers either directly or through a delivery service. Again, 30 days after we have 5 active operational delivery service licenses, self-delivery must cease. Hybrid retailers are required to have a licensed pharmacist on site when they're open to the public. They must have private consultation space and priority entrance for qualifying patients and caregivers. They cannot convert to a retailer license. They can only convert back to a dispensary. The conversion for dispensary facilities to a hybrid is $1 million unless they have equity joint ventures, at which point their fee is reduced to $500,000. For lottery applicants, the window commences on February 24th. So that's coming up really soon, this Thursday, and you'll see the fees there. The lottery application period ends May 25th. Delivery service and transporters. The delivery service allows for the delivery to qualifying patients, caregivers, and consumers. Employees must be full-time, at least 35 hours per week. No more than 25 delivery employees employed by any one delivery service at any given time. 30 days after the first 5 delivery services are operational, self-delivery by other establishments will cease. The transporter license only is for the transport of cannabis between establishments, labs, and research programs. No delivery to patients or consumers is permitted. The delivery service and transporter fees are the same. The application window for delivery service is February 17th to May 18th. The transporter lottery application window is March 24th to June 22nd. And the licensing fees are there. So as kind of saw, there's a bunch of different pathways to licensure here. There's conversion, so the producers to expanded producers and dispensary facilities to hybrid retailers. There's equity joint ventures, where licensed producers in dispensary facilities partner with social equity applicants. There's social equity partners, which are specific to a partnership with licensed producer. There's a social equity cultivator license, social equity micro-cultivator assistance program, which are going to be funded by the Social Equity Council, and more information will follow about that in the future. And there's the lottery process. So these social equity cultivators in the disproportionately impacted area have this discrete 3-month application period. Social equity applicant documentation is required. Criminal background checks will occur. There's a $3 fee, and the Social Equity Council must approve criteria for the provisional license. Equity joint ventures, social equity documentation is required. You must partner with an existing medical producer or dispensary. It must be at least 50% owned by individuals who meet the social equity definition. And the Social Equity Council must approve the EJV before they can apply for the provisional license. And they're also, like every other credential here, subject to a criminal background check. Social equity partnership is a very limited kind of opportunity for social equity applicants to partner with the producers. In return, the producer gives 5% of the gross base, mentorship, overhead costs for 5 years, and the social equity partner gets 100% of the profits from that. There is no closing on that application window for that process, and the social equity has to approve the agreement and the social equity applicant documentation. And the other pathway is the lottery. The lottery for social equity applicants, the documentation is required to prove that. There's a finite application window for each lottery. There's multiple rounds of lottery are anticipated for most licenses. There are 2 lotteries that run for each license type, a social equity and a general lottery. Half of all the selections of the lottery are reserved for social equity applicants. So the documentation requirements that are needed for applicants for social equity criteria are presented on the screen there, and our application will walk people right through all of those and request documents to be uploaded. There's also criteria for a workforce development plan, which can be specifically found there and on the Social Equity Council's website. So the cultivator in a DIA pathway is the first pathway we're going to discuss. For a 3-month period, the application window will be open. And that physical location of that facility needs to be in a disproportionately impacted area. And they do not participate in the lottery. The provisional cultivator license application needs to be submitted. Documentation demonstrating the applicant meets the criteria for the social equity applicant. These gets reviewed and approved by the council. The national criminal history background check has to occur, and then the applicant will have to pay the $3 million fee, which will be deposited in the Social Equity and Innovation Fund. Once the provisional license has been granted, the applicants must submit their project labor agreement, and a labor peace agreement requirements as applicable. To obtain the final license, the applicant may apply for the final license once the provisional has been issued. They have to submit the application, a contract with approved electronic tracking system, that's the seed to sale system, or the cannabis analytic and tracking system. The right to exclusively occupy the location in the disproportionately impacted area where the facility will be located, necessary local zoning approval and permits, a business plan, a social equity plan approved by the council, written policies preventing diversion and misuse of cannabis, sales of cannabis to underage persons, and blueprints of the facility and all other security requirements. Applicants that are looking to get into this stage of license should make sure that they're communicating with the Department of Consumer Protection regularly. A drug control agent will be assigned to inspect the facility throughout the build-out process. So conversion. So for conversion to a hybrid, the dispensary facility may convert to a hybrid retailer license and sell adult use cannabis to adult consumers over the age of 21, as well as medical marijuana to qualifying patients and caregivers. The dispensary facility may apply for a hybrid license without being subject to the lottery. Hybrid retailers are required to have a licensed pharmacist on premises when facility is open to the public, including qualifying patients or caregivers, and at least 35 hours a week. They have to have a private consultation space and priority entrance for medical marijuana patients, and a secure location for cannabis that can't be delivered while the business is open or not open. They must submit a license conversion application, medical cannabis preservation plan, $1 million conversion fee, or $500,000 if they're participating in EJV, workforce development plan, which will need to be approved by the Social Equity Council. For expanded producer, the commissioner they must obtain approval from the commissioner to sell, deliver, transfer, transport, manufacture, package adult use cannabis. They have to submit an application. They have to have a medical cannabis preservation plan, $3 million conversion fee, or the $1.5 million if they participate in at least 2 equity joint ventures. They have to have an approved workforce development plan, and they have to contribute $500,000 to the Social Equity Council or evidence of a social equity partnership. And many times in these application processes, if anything is changing in the facility, we'll be inspecting them as well. And same goes for dispensary facilities as well. So an equity joint venture is a business that partners with a licensed medical marijuana producer or medical marijuana dispensary that is at least 50% owned or controlled by an individual or individuals, or the applicant is an individual who meets the social equity criteria outlined below. So this again is just the definitions for the social equity applicant and the required documentation. So a social equity partner is a unique partnership with the producer, must provide the social equity partner to 5% of the gross base, mentorship and overhead costs, and 100% of the profits for that 5-year period. Next pathway is a lottery. So 50% of the licenses allotted are designated for the social equity lottery. So we're going to run 2 separate lotteries, and in a future program, we discuss a little bit more of the lottery program. Applicants that are not selected, that have identified themselves as a social equity applicant, but are not selected from the lottery, will automatically be entered into the general lottery. Applicants who are selected from the social equity lottery who are found not to meet social equity criteria may enter the general lottery upon payment of the fee difference. And that has to happen within 5 days of their notification, the payment of the difference. All lottery applicants must submit a lottery application and the fee, the documentation required by the Social Equity Council to verify social equity status, and the backer applications must be submitted prior to the closing of the lottery period. And just to add a little bit more to the backer applications, the backers are individuals and not businesses. General lottery participants consist of the general lottery applicants, the disqualified social equity applicants who pay the fee difference, and the social equity applicants not selected through the social equity lottery. And they, for general lottery applicants, they must submit the lottery application and fee, and the disqualified social equity applicants have to request entry to the general lottery through the through our e-licensing system and pay the fee difference. Provisional license. The provisional license, we'll generally move to that, provided you don't have any disqualifying convictions. The general summary of those are convictions related to fraud, money laundering, bribery, and identity theft. But the link on our website and on the cannabis website really gets into those disqualifying convictions more. And if you're very concerned about those, I would make sure that you put a lot of time into those, understanding what those convictions are. There's a common ownership, which may prohibit an applicant from getting a full license. And at the time the lottery is conducted, that person has 2 or more licenses or includes a backer that has managerial control of or is a backer of 2 or more licensees in the same license type or category. They're restricted. Cannabis business with administrative finding or judicial decisions. So backers who individually or in connection with a cannabis business in another state or country that has had administrative action or findings or judicial decisions that may substantively compromise the integrity of the cannabis program. This slide generally depicts graphically in a more of a flow chart the process for review of the lottery applications to the provisional license. And so you'll see the DCP reviews the selected lottery applicants to determine if they include backers with prohibiting conditions. If not, they move on to qualifications, and then they have 60 days to complete a provisional. In this pathway, if the applicant gets notified that the application has a disqualified backer, the applicants can remove the backer within 30 days with an exception for deceased backers. And then there's a restructuring and another review. And then can potentially move on to the provisional license. In the provisional licensing process, applicants may be required to show at least the commencement or begin the contract with the approved electronic tracking system, preliminary security plan, initial mock-ups or blueprints of the physical facility, social equity plan for approval by the council, and the workforce development plan for approval by the council. Final license. Council, in order to obtain the final license, the council needs to review and approve the social equity plan, if applicable, and a workforce development plan. Applicants must submit all documentation for licensing requirements and final licensing fee. Again, that is also through our e-license system. The Department of Consumer Protection will review the documentation and issue the final license upon satisfactory inspection. Other documents that may be required is a finalized contract with the approved electronic tracking system, the right to occupy the location of the establishment, local zoning approval, labor peace agreements, certification of project labor agreement, social equity plan approved by the council, workforce development plan approved by the council, policies preventing diversion, misuse, and underage sales, all other security requirements needed, and a final inspection. So that concludes my presentation for today, and now we will enter the question period.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you very much. We had some questions that we wanted to answer. I don't know if anyone wants, and I don't, can the participants see the questions and answers once they've been answered, once they've been answered?
Hi, Jenny Ray. This is Diana. I believe they can.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to take a look at them and maybe walk through a few. There were some questions about the family size scale for median income and the 3-year tax qualification. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then maybe we can talk a little bit later about zoning. There was a zoning question too.
Yeah, so we are actually finishing and I asked Mr. Klinger if he would submit that question to our mailbox. I am actually having my final meeting tomorrow to go over exactly what we're going to be looking at as far as the income, if we're going to use family size or scale. I can tell you that we will be looking at annual income, and if the family income goes over the threshold for 1 year, that applicant will be disqualified. So it is in each of the 3 years, you cannot exceed the state household median income. We found that there's a couple of different scales to look at, and so we're looking at which is the most equitable, and we'll have that determined by tomorrow. There was another interesting question about documentation that is required for the social equity applicant around the ownership and control of the company. So there are many documents that are listed under the criteria for ownership and control. Some information is absolutely required, and that is based on the structure of your company. So if you're a corporation and you've been set up as a corporation and you're applying as a corporation, you will need to provide all of the corporate documents that are applicable to your corporation, and that includes an LLC. So some of the documentation, like for a sole proprietor or a partnership, someone asked specifically about the articles of incorporation. They are that, articles of incorporation. Sole proprietors and partners are not incorporated. So they are operating under agreement. So a partnership agreement is, if that's the structure of your company, you're not a corporation. I would also encourage folks to speak with an attorney and an accountant about the structure of the business. Do not look to set up what you think will get you in, and by providing the least amount of information. A corporation, if you're not familiar, is set up basically to protect your personal assets. So if someone is going to sue you and you are a corporation, they can only sue your corporation. They cannot sue you as an individual in most cases. I'm not an attorney, so this is not legal advice. If you're going to set up, so let's say you're going to be a transporter or provide a delivery service, and someone asks about using their own personal vehicle, and you're signing yourself up as a sole proprietor. If you have an accident, the victims will be able to sue you personally. So if you own a beautiful home, if you have other assets, those assets are actually out there on the table because you do not have the corporation to protect you. But I would encourage each and every one of you, before you submit your application, make sure that the structure that you have set up or that you are applying under is the right one for you. Tax purposes as well. So speak with an accountant related to that.
So there's a question about the difference between a producer and a cultivator. And while Diana is typing, I think it's important to point out. A cultivator can choose to supply cannabis to a medical or the adult use market. A producer is a kind of a legacy license that may or may not get new opportunities in the future, but it has to supply the medical market at minimum, but it may also expand into the adult use market. There's a question in here about backers in Connecticut owning interest in other cannabis businesses. There are no true restrictions to that, unless sometimes those interests kind of bring you back into Connecticut. It's somewhat of a complicated scenario where that interest may bring you to multiple registrations in Connecticut or credentials in Connecticut. That's where it could hang you up. But it also, if there were some actions by the state that in where that backer is registered for some other cannabis establishment, those are disclosable in our application. So we would need to know if that backer's business in another state maybe was disciplined for so any reason that may be detrimental to our program. So there's no new medical. So the question is, you mentioned that there's no new medical dispensaries at this time, but hybrids are in the lottery. Please clarify. So there's no discrete medical marijuana dispensary. They're only hybrids. So hybrids serve both the adult use and medical. A dispensary only serves the medical.
I don't know if there's any other questions that people have. It's 6:41. You still have plenty of time for you to ask your questions if you would prefer, or if you have anything that you wanted to talk about offline. The Social Equity Council's email is sec@ct.gov, and you can send your questions there if you think of something later.
Yeah, as always, dcp.cannabis@ct.gov is a great place to file, to send in your questions as well.
Yeah, Paula says that the real struggle is in finding DIA properties. Yeah, I don't know, all of the ins and outs, but we are going to have a webinar with with realtors about finding locations and what you should be looking for, or what's out there and what's available. So that's coming up in another week or so. I think a couple of weeks coming up.
So there's a question about financial contributors who do not meet backer or key employee get entered into the application. So if the financial contributor is less than 5%, then they don't need to be entered into the application if they don't have any ownership or control. And that's really the difference. If it's 5% or less than 5% with ownership and control.
I'm going to share my screen because we do have another webinar coming up tomorrow at 12. And I just want to put that up for people to know that tomorrow's webinar, if you all can see that, is the application process. So that will be 12 o'clock. The link is here. You can click on that to join. If you need the link, you can also email sec@ct.gov, but we will be sending it out. We have a nice distribution list now of folks who have been attending the webinars and asking questions. And so we've been collecting your emails so that we can keep you informed and up to date on information that we're gathering and we're putting together. So here is the invitation for you to join the application process webinar tomorrow.
So there's a question about the backer is willing and able to provide proof of social equity requirements. So that's just an affirmative statement to let you go forward. So if you are if you're applying and you are a social equity applicant, you do have to submit social equity criteria. The department, so there's another question about the workforce development plan and the social equity plans. Those will be part of the actual application, and the department will forward those to the Social Equity Council on your behalf.
The hypothetical question here, Rod, that says one could sell 4% of the company after the provisional license is attained. I don't
think there's enough information to answer that question, because there's too much. There are complicating factors. If that person's a social equity applicant, and that 4% means something to how they meet the criteria. If it's a non-social equity applicant, the 4% could be sold, I believe, earlier. And then there's antitrust reviews depending on who's buying it.
Okay, Robert, I see that you said that you emailed the question already, and I will get back to you. You probably didn't respond, so I don't have an answer just quite yet. How many cultivator licenses will be granted this round? This question, Rod, do you see this? How will financial contributors who do not meet backer or key employee marks get entered into the application?
Yeah, I answered that one. So it really comes down to, is that financial contributor greater than 5%, or do they have ownership and control? If they have either of those things, they have to be entered into the application, and they have to submit a backer application. If not, and they're under those things, then they do not have to submit an application.
Rod, there was a question about the social equity cultivator under section 149 and how many cultivators would be licensing. And I think we might want to talk about, I don't know if you wanted to mention that there is no limit, but there is a time limit.
Yeah, the only limit that exists in the section 149 disproportionately impacted area cultivators is the discrete time window for application submission. As we say in many of our communications, please don't rush your applications. Please make sure that you are thoughtful and detail oriented about the applications that you submit to us. But you have that time window, and make sure you complete your backer application also before that time window ends, because those applications submitted after may not be reviewed as part of your application. It's incredibly important to make sure that people do that. But the 90-day window is discrete. It ends on May 3rd. There is no cap on the total.
And as Rod said, there is no benefit in being first in submitting your application. Over the next couple of weeks, between the Social Equity Council and the Department of Consumer Protection, we'll be partnering to provide you with additional information that could be really helpful to you and submitting your application and understanding some of the intricacies. So we put these webinars on because we're creating this, we're building this plane as we're flying it, and we find out something new every single day. So do not rush. It is best to put together a comprehensive application and make sure that you have all of the information that we have to offer.
So if a backer contains less than 5% and they have a disqualifying conviction, do they still apply? It depends on if they have ownership and control. The workforce development plan and social equity plans are not required for the initial application. But we really want to make sure that businesses are starting to think about those things. There's guidance out there for that from the Social Equity Council in certain ways, and the statute itself or the Public Act. But the plan needs to be finalized in order to get the final license.
And they will be, as you progress through the application process, you will know when to submit the workforce plan, development plan, and the social equity plan. It will be called for at some portion or some part of the application process.
There's a question about an individual is applying for a delivery service, possibly a product packager or a transporter. Are they correct to put themselves as a backer to their own application? If all the people that are involved in their own LLC, all the people involved in that LLC that have put a financial interest forward are required to submit a backer application. The LLC itself does not submit a backer application. And so all of the people that are supporting that business and part of that LLC have an ownership stake or some management or control need to submit backer applications.
And we've got about 9 more minutes. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. You can also submit questions to Social Equity Council SEC at ct.gov. I can only always remember my my email, Rod, so that's why I never say yours.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to take mine. Ours is DCP, Department Consumer Protection .cannabis@ct.gov. When you start to get into the application itself, you may see us start to respond from a newer license or newer email address. It's dcp.cannabislicense@ct.gov. We're trying to parse out some of those communications, so just make sure you pay attention to those. And for those of you that have applied already, we will likely be sending out another email through our e-license system, just explaining that a backer is not a business; it's a human, and that everyone that's identified as a backer with the backer rules needs to submit a backer application. But I can't reinforce this enough, especially for the lotteries. But really, take your time with your applications, set forth complete applications, check your documents before you submit. You can start these applications and save them and close them. So you don't have to submit them all in one fell swoop. You can take your time and do that, get your documents organized, so that you're submitting the best application you can to give you the best options if you are fortunate enough to be selected in the lottery.
So we have no other questions. And so Ray has his hand raised, but Ray, you're going to have to put your question in the Q&A or your comments in the Q&A. We cannot respond. We can't hear you. You can't speak during this time. We only take the questions or comments through Q&A. Okay, so I think we can give people 5 minutes back of their lives Since we're at 6:55, we have no open questions. We've answered 24 questions. And again, if you think of something a little bit later or tomorrow, sec@ct.gov, we will respond to you as soon as we can. And the DCP also has a dedicated email.
dcp.cannabis@ct.gov.
Social Equity Council also has a website, socialequitycouncil.ct.gov and or ct.gov/Social Equity Council. You will find updated information, criteria information, clarifications on our website related to the social equity applicant criteria and process, and regulatory information on and lottery information, application information on the DCP website. DCP Cannabis.
All right.
Thank you all again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. If tomorrow we are also having another webinar. If you need that link, please send an email to sec@ct.gov and we will get that link out to you. All righty. So thank you very much. Good night, Rod.
Hey, everybody. Have a great evening.